Hi everybody, welcome back to Foss Media. So if you're wanting how to merge multiple MP3 files into one, you're in the right place. This can be a bit of a hassle depending on the MP3 files themselves, as there are so many different types with different attributes and so on. One method may work on some, but not on another. So today I'm going to show you 3 different ways, each having its own advantage. The first method will be using MP3 wrap. The second one will be the cat command. And then lastly, we'll be using ffmpeg. And now with that intro out of the way, let's just jump in. So as you can see on my screen here, I have my file manager open with a list of MP3s that I want to merge into one file. And the reason I want to do this is because this is an audiobook and not all my players automatically advance to the next track. So it'd be nice to be able to merge all these into one. And maybe I'll just jump over to the terminal. And these are those same files right here. So the current working directory is music, Noam Chomsky, necessary illusions. Music, Noam Chomsky, necessary illusions. So we're in that same directory. And yeah, I think the first tool we're going to use it will be MP3 wrap. So to check if you already have it on your system, you can say apt search MP3 wrap, hit enter. And as you can see, I already have it installed. If that wasn't the case for you and you're using a Debian-based system, you can just use the command sudo apt install MP3 wrap, and that should put it on your system for you. And then once you have it installed, it would be nice to get a list of options to see what we can do with the tool. So to do that, all you have to do is have a look at the man page. You can say man, MP3, wrap, hit enter, and here we go. And we don't have too many options, but sometimes that's really nice. Whereas all we're trying to do is throw these files together, as we don't need to encode anything or anything like that. So we have the -A option up top, and that will just append an MP3 to an already existing wrapped MP3 file. -L will break that file down for you. So in case you already have a file that's already been wrapped and you want to see the individual files that were used to create it, you can use the -L. And then of course we have -V for verbose. Yeah, but today I don't think we're going to even be using any of those. We'll just use the command by itself. So I'm just going to quit out of this. So to use the tool, all we have to do is say MP3 wrap with a space, and then whatever you're going to want to call the finished product. So I'll say example. Maybe I'll spell that right. There we go. .mp3, and then a space, and then type in or copy the name of each file. So I'll just copy this and paste it right in there, and then throw in a space, and then proceed with the next file and so on. And I think today, to save some time, I'm just going to deal with these two MP3s. So we have the name of the tool right here, MP3 wrap. Example.mp3 will be what the file will be called after we wrapped it. And then we have the 2 files that we're wrapping. So we got that one and that one right there. And maybe before we run this, I'll just jump back over the file manager and we'll have a quick look at those files. So here's the first one we're going to be wrapping, and there's the second one. So theoretically, when we're done, the file that we end up with should be a combination of both these, both these files, obviously. And main thing I want to check is just make sure the duration is somewhat approximate to what we guess it's going to be. So for example, if I double click on this first file, it'll start to play. And to avoid copyright, I'm not going to be able to play much of the file. But as you can see, it has a duration of almost 26 minutes. And then if we go over to the second file, do the same. It has a duration of 24.5 minutes. So theoretically, when we're done, the duration of our file should be about 49 to 50 minutes long. And just checking, we'll have to check and just make sure that happened. So to do that, we can just go back over the terminal and run this command. So I'll hit enter. And it's already done. And yeah, as you can see, it didn't need to do much. So yeah, it didn't take long at all. So if I ls-l, there's the name of the file that we just created, example_mp3 wrap.mp3. Go over to the file manager. There it is right there. So now if we double click on that file to play it, you can see the overall duration is about 51 minutes, which is pretty much what we guessed it would be. And then maybe I'll just make sure it merged correctly. I'll just skip through the track a bit.
Focusing. It's like other politically huge psychological.
Yeah, everything seems good there. So everything now looks successful. There's just a couple things I'm not too crazy about. The first one is the title or the name of the file. As you can see, MP3 wrap is throwing its own branding in there, which isn't always great. But say if you're going to be playing this file, say on a website where all this stuff is going to be buried inside of HTML anyways, it's not going to matter. And we also lost the ELDMART. The ELDMART. So I guess it just pretty much depends on the circumstance you're going to be using the file in. So if you're going to be using this on various devices like tablets, or phones, stuff like that, you may actually want to see the title. But if you're just going to be playing the file within a website that's going to be buried in HTML, it's not going to matter anyways. And you can actually change this. You can rename the file. So say if I tried to rename it here and just say renamed and enter and double click on it.
Operation of the kind the military.
You can see it still keeps the same title with MP3 wrap with its branding in there. So yeah, it just depends on the circumstance. I guess you're using the file. So I'll just get rid of that. And then in case, say, you have a bunch of files in a particular directory that you want to wrap like I do here, because I just showed an example with the first two because I was being lazy, didn't want to copy all those in. All you have to do that is just say MP3 wrap with a space, whatever you want to call the file. Example.mp3. And then throw in an asterisk in there to indicate that you want to use all the files within the directory. And then .mp3. We'll use all the .mp3 files in this directory. So it should merge all these files together into one. So now with that in there, I'm just going to enter. Yeah, and that didn't take long at all. So yeah, we just did the exact same thing with all 10 files. And then if I go over to the file manager, there's a file right there. And then if I play, yeah, you can see it's now 4 hours and 10 minutes long. So I'll just let that play.
As I pursue the reach of expressed by separate guerrilla terror. So yeah, I want.
So everything looks good. Yeah, the only crappy part is of course the title here, and the ELDMART's gone. But if that's not a concern, I think MP3 wrap is definitely your easiest route to combine those files. And that's MP3 wrap. So maybe what I'll do now is I just get rid of that file that we just created. And that should be gone. So now we can move on with cat. So cat, like you probably already know, is a short form for concatenate. And it's going to merge all these files together for us too. And to use that, all we have to do is say cat with a space and then throw in your files. So I'll just use the same first two that we did in the previous example. Throw a space in there. And the next one. Now after that, throw in a space and then a greater than sign and then another space and then whatever you want to call the file. So I'll say example.mp3. And then enter. And it's already done. So now if I say ls-l, there it is right there, example.mp3. And what's nice, one nice thing about cat too, is it doesn't throw in any branding into the title. So it's just going to be named whatever we called it. Now I go back over the file manager. There it is right there, example.mp3. And then if I play that, yeah, it's also showing it to be just shy of 51 minutes long. So about what is expected. And then like with MP3 wrap, we can also use the asterisk with the MP3 extension on it to merge all those files if we don't have to copy and paste the names of each title for each file. And maybe I'll show you that now too. So we can just use that last command, but instead of using all this, we just throw in that asterisk, .mp3, hit enter. Actually, maybe I'll delete example first. So I say rm example, .mp3, fls-l. Yeah, it's gone. So all we have to do is say cat, and we want to concatenate. Everything has a .mp3 extension on it. And then a greater than sign with a space and then whatever you want to call it. So I'll say example.mp3 and enter. And it's done. So now if we go back to the file manager here, and there it is. Now if I double click on it, you can see it's gained 4 hours and 10 minutes long. So I'm pretty confident that it got all those files. And with the addition of that, it preserves the original title, which is nice. And it also preserves the album art, which is another advantage of using cat. Yeah, actually, now that I think about it more, cat would definitely be my preferable way to go here. But I find too, sometimes this doesn't always work with every single MP3. And you kind of have to go back and forth depending on the actual MP3 that you're dealing with. Sometimes MP3 wrap works better, sometimes cat will work better. And if neither of those do the trick for you, I got one more to show you. So we go back to the terminal here. And I'll get rid of example.mp3. So another option we have is ffmpeg. And this is a great tool that can accomplish pretty much anything you want to do with any media file. But it is fairly huge in size. It has ton of different options and things you can do with it. But for today, we're just going to kind of use it in its simplest form. And yeah, you may or may not already have it installed. But in case you don't, you can just, again, say sudo apt install ffmpeg. And that'll throw it on your system for you. Well, like I said, it is a fairly large package. I think that's about 410 megabytes or something like that. But yeah, I guess for modern systems, that's not really that much these days anyways. But yeah, just a heads up, it is a fairly large package to install. But it's certainly useful if you're going to be doing anything with media files for all kinds of different types of editing. ffmpeg is just great. And certainly a lot lighter weight than, say, a lot of other graphical tools would be. You can do pretty much anything you want with ffmpeg. But it does definitely take a learning curve, as there's a ton of different options and things you can do with it. For today, we're just going to use a couple of those options. And yeah, maybe I'll just go ahead and do that now. So to use it, all we have to do is say ffmpeg with a space. And then, yeah, I think I'm just going to concatenate these first two files here just to save some time. So let's try to think how to do this here. -I for the input file, and then a double quote, and then concat, because you want to concatenate them. And, I forgot, ffmpeg doesn't work great on these types of files. As you can see, the way I've named them, they have some spaces in there, and I've used the single quotes to eliminate problems with those spaces. But ffmpeg isn't crazy about using files that are named in this type of format. So what I've done is I've created another directory called renamed, which is all these same files just renamed. So maybe I'll go into that and show you. And now for ls-l here, we have the exact same file, it's just renamed. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way down to 10. And if you're renaming your files like this for ffmpeg, I think you'll definitely want to throw in some zero padding in there. So don't call it just 1 MP3, 2 MP3, and so on. If you're going to be going over 9, make sure to throw some zeros in there for the single digits. And I think it should work out a little bit better for you. But anyways, for now, we're just going to deal with the first two. So we can say ffmpeg with a space, and then -I for the input file, and then concat. And I guess I'll say 01.mp3. And then you have to throw in a pipe symbol. And then 02.mp3, another pipe. Actually, maybe I'll do 3. So 03.mp3. And yeah, close off the quote. And then we'll need another command or another option here. vsync, I think. 2. And what that'll do is it'll prevent any errors or anything like that may occur if, say, there's album art inside the MP3s. ffmpeg will also try to convert that into an MP3, which doesn't always work out great, but I found that throwing in this flag right here helps prevent that error. Or we may get a warning or something like that, but it won't be an error. And then we can use the -C to specify the codec, A, I think, for audio, and then copy, and then whatever you want to call the file. So let's say example.mp3. So we have ffmpeg in there. Our input is going to be file 1, file 2, and file 3. Yeah, and then vsync 2. So I wish I could give you a better explanation on that. But to be honest with you, I'm not really that familiar with ffmpeg. I kind of just use it and figure it out as I go along if I happen to need it, if everything else pretty much fails. And then for the codec, we're going to be using the A, which I think stands for audio, and then copy, and then example.mp3 will be what our finished product will be called. So now we have all that in there. I'll just hit enter. And it doesn't look as pretty. And as you can see, we have a couple warnings. And I think this just has something to do with the album art that's embedded in the MP3. It's not crazy about. Or sometimes you may get a list of MP3s in a file that have different bit rates and stuff like that. You may get these warnings. But I found even though I get the warnings, it usually produces the MP3 that I want anyways. So I'm not too concerned about it. If these were red, I certainly would be. But yellow's not great, but it's okay. Well, anyways, let's have a look at the file. So we say ls-l. There it is right there. Example MP3. So let's go to the file manager. And, oh, it's a rename. Sorry, I almost forgot. There we go, example.mp3. And then if I play that, as you can see, it preserves the album art. It also preserves the title, which is nice. And the duration is 1 hour and 12 minutes, which sounds about right for all these files being concatenated. So yeah, that's also how to do with ffmpeg. So I definitely prefer the results that we got from cat and ffmpeg over MP3 wrap. But again, I guess it just depends on the situation or the circumstance you're going to be running the file in. And then maybe another quick thing I can show you is how we can do these in, say, a batch command like we did with MP3 wrap and cat. So we don't have to type in every single file that's within this directory. We can also use an additional command to create a list for us, and then just pass that list inside of the ffmpeg command. So maybe I'll do that. Before I do, I'll get rid of our example here. If I ls-l, it's gone. So what we have to do is create a file. And for that, maybe we can choose a for loop. So for f in everything mp3, do echo, space in there, and we'll just call it file. And we'll use the f variable, close off the quote, and then push the output to track list. I'll call it txt. And I think that should work. So that should create a list for us called track list that will list out all these files for us. And then when we run the ffmpeg command, we can just pass in this list instead of having to type out every single file that's in that directory. So let's hit enter. And no errors, so we're good there. And now if I ls-l, there's the list that we just created right there. So now if I use cat to check that out, cat has so many uses. What a great tool. Yeah, you can see there's our list right there. So now we should be able to just pass this in to the ffmpeg command, and it should concatenate all these different files for us into one MP3. So I'll just clear this and do that. All we have to do is say ffmpeg -f, because we're going to be concatenating from a file. Say concat -i for the input file, and we'll use track lists. So I'll copy that, paste that in there, and then we're also going to need that vsync command in here for the value of 2 -c:(a) for the codec, and then copy, and I'll just call it example.mp3. So theoretically, this should merge all these files for us into one MP3. So we got the -f flag in there to indicate we're going to be grabbing the list from a file. Concat, because we're concatenating. -i for the input. Track list will be the list that we're going to be using. That vsync command with the value 2. We'll be using the audio codec, and then copying to example.mp3, and then I'll hit enter. And looks good. So I'm not seeing any red here. We did get some warnings. But how we can get around that, to be honest with you, I'm not quite sure. Maybe you'll have to play around with that and figure that out if that's bugging you. Well, let's see what we got here. And there's our example.mp3. So if I jump back over the file manager and play that. Duration's almost 4 hours and 10 minutes. So pretty much the same. Maybe it just got rid of some blank space in there. I'm not quite sure. But as you can see, it didn't preserve the title or the album art for us. So yeah, again, I guess again, it just depends on the circumstance you're going to be playing the file, whether that's going to be an issue for you or not. So the easiest way, I think, would just to be to use the command that we originally did when we typed in the name of each file. That seemed to work out better when preserving the title of the track and the album art. But if that's not a concern for you and you have a whole bunch of files in the directory and you don't want to take the time to type them all in, you can just use these commands that I showed you to create the list, and then just pass that list into the ffmpeg command. And I think that about wraps it up for this one. No pun intended. In case you're wondering how to merge multiple MP3 files into a single file, I hope this helped. For example, sometimes the files will merge successfully. Something like the duration of the timestamp may be messed up. And this could just be because MP3 files vary, I don't want to say in their format, but they just have a whole bunch of stuff added. And sometimes they're just not always consistent within a file. Say if you download a file like this and it has a bunch of MP3s in it, the odd one may have a different bit rate or something like that, which will also throw off ffmpeg. Even though it'll still probably create the file, you'll just get a bunch of warnings because it won't be happy about it. But it can actually cause some problems. So you just kind of have to play around with it. And I usually start with cat. And if that doesn't work out, I'll go with something like MP3 wrap. And then if that doesn't work out, I'll go with something like ffmpeg. But yeah, I guess if one method doesn't work, just try another. And if that doesn't work, I usually assume that's maybe a missing codec. And then I'll just start installing those. But yeah, if you run into any issues, please let me know. Whereas I'm just pretty much learning this stuff myself. I've had to do this with multiple MP3 files over the years. And methods of doing this, for some reason, just seem to be changing. Whereas some things work some days and don't work others, and you have to revert back to other methods or different solutions to achieving that goal. But yeah, once again, I hope this helped, and see you on the next one. Bye for now.